Like I said, my name is Jonathan Rodriguez, and we thought in Readin Pride that we needed to do something more active to actually contribute to our community in this, specifically in these difficult times that our country is going through, and our community as a whole. Before saying a couple of more words, we want to also address something that happened inside our organization in terms of a great loss that we just had. Richard, would you like to speak on behalf of Readin Pride Celebration?
I'm going to get emotional, so excuse me. It hasn't hit me yet. But, we lost a mentor to myself. Friday night, we lost Richard Spangler, our longtime running president. Like I said, he's been a mentor to me. And once again, I said it hasn't hit me because I haven't had time to sit and keep myself quiet until Enrique suggested it to me just a few minutes ago. I have reached out to Ben. Ben's been doing the best he can. The services and everything are announced on our Facebook page and our website, I'm sure. It's going to be a rough time this week, especially for me and Ben, and others that know, and Amber, because we've been part of Rich's life since Readin Pride began. But it's difficult, and it is a great loss. He will be missed. And he was looking forward to our virtual Pride because he couldn't wait to see everybody. And the other sad part is tomorrow is Richard's birthday. So, well, thank you. So.
We truly, Richard will truly be missed in our community, and we just hope that we can be there also for Ben, because they were together for many years, and they've been together, since the beginning of Pride. So we hope that Ben can have all the support that he needs, and Richard will definitely be missed. So getting on with our forum, I just have a couple of words. In 1969, of riots took place inside and outside of a bar in New York. It was a Black trans woman and a Hispanic woman who threw the first rocks. The Black transgender woman who threw that first rock was Marsha P. Johnson. The riots in Stonewall were the force behind the political and social movement that nourished the advance of the LGBTQ freedom rights. Especially because of this, the queer community has the moral obligation to support the Black communities, especially on this historic moment that we're living in. George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, Tony McDaniel are some of the people killed by injustice, systematic racism, and brutality. Recognizing the good intentions sometimes are overshadowed by unintended microaggressions, which are products of ignorance, lack of racial sensitivity, and interpreting it from the LGBT perspective. Readin Pride Celebration in alliance with Dear Readin and the LGBT Center of Greater Readin wanted to open the discussion on how the LGBT freedom and Black rights movement converge, and what are the most effective ways for LGBT organizations to support the Black community. And some of the first things that we want to talk, well, I'll tell you in a little bit. With us, as speakers, we have Michelle Deck from the LGBT Center of Greater Reading.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Yes, Michelle, your pronouns?
She, her.
Okay, thank you so much. So we have Reverend Sandra Fees from the First Unitarian Universalist Church of Berks.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm Sandra Fees, and my pronouns are she and her.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. We also have Marquise Richards from the Dear Reading podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. My pronouns are he, him.
And also, you may know them from the amazing, inspirational, and great peaceful protest that we had yesterday in the city. Angel Venty and Jay Derek. Are they there? Oh, I think their signal went. Yeah. Let's see if we can get them again. If not, that's okay. We can tackle that back. Thank you all for being here today. Like I said, feel free to share your ideas, or opinions, thoughts, or questions on the chat.
Can you hear me now? Hi, guys. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay, yes. Wait, I lost you, wait. Okay, yes. Angel and Jay, would you like to present yourself?
No. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Awesome.
Sorry, we're at City Park and the signal up here.
We lost track of time, and I really apologize for that. We're like walking right now, so we can like set up.
We got
in
too
one
busy
spot.
cleaning and stuff, so I'm sorry about that, guys.
That's okay. You were doing an amazing work, and I hope that we can talk a little bit about what you're doing before the meeting ends.
Yes.
Awesome. Angel and Jay, would you like to share what your pronouns are?
Him.
He,
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So yeah, Josh, I don't know if you want to.
Oh, okay, yeah. Good to meet you. God bless you. Yes, yes. Thank you. What's your name? Sorry? My name's Earl.
Hey, thank you.
Okay. So Josh, do you want to start?
Sure. I mean, most of you were here when I introduced myself. My name's Josh. I'm another member of Reading Pride Celebration, pronouns he, him. Today we're going to be talking about some the intersectionality of LGBT queerness and being part of the Black community, as well as racial sensitivity and how we can be better allies to the Black community. So starting out the discussion with the topic of racial sensitivity, I know that many members of our community that are people of color have certainly experienced racial insensitivity during their time here. Would one of our speakers like to speak to what racial sensitivity means to them?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So this is Marquise. When we use the language like racist sensitivity, I kind of think about it a little bit more in terms of just like having a certain awareness of how race, power, and privilege all play a role within one another. Each of these things really interlock, and they gets even more when you think about the intersections of being a woman or being in the trans community, stuff like that. So you have to think about it from an intersectional lens when we are having these discussions and seeing like how multiple identities like cross and intersect and how certain systems work against them. So for me, it would be like you immediately see my Blackness is like the first thing you see. So that's a bit of an intersection to have. Whereas like a Black woman would go through a much more different experience than I would, because there's a certain level of privileges that come with me being a man, but doesn't come with being Black, right? So I've experienced this in various forms, whether it's the workplace, peers, you could say dating life, policy, education, and so many other spaces on how this kind of works with itself. So I guess that's like a very brief definition of like how I think about racial sensitivity and how we have to learn racial sensitivity, but also understand how we participate in it, and knowing there's a duality where we might have perpetuated something in terms of like anti-Blackness or racism.
Yeah, and part of the racial sensitivities in terms of organizations, it's never a bad or late or wrong thing to have a racial sensitivity training, or for example, or a cultural humility training, because we everyone carries prejudice within them, depending on where did you grow up, where do you come from, there will be certain prejudice inside ourselves. So we actually need to be aware of them, study, and just do a lot of reflection on how those prejudices are, to then be an actual a person, and not only an ally, but just a basic human being, and just promote the the basic human decency also.
Yeah, it's a lot of unlearning that comes in this space, because we're so used to like, this is how we're supposed to like navigate in this world. A lot of the representation we see sometimes isn't the best representation. So it's difficult for people to have to unlearn that, because that means you have to decolonize so much that was so ingrained in you and is almost second nature. So now you have to be aware of, oh, am I being misogynist in this moment? Oh, am I receiving this wrong because there might be a gender difference on how this is? Is it receiving wrong because now there's a racial difference? So that's what I mean. Like, it's a consistent, it's like hygiene. You kind of have to always do it in order to stay up with it. So think about it that way. It's an ongoing process. You got to wash yourself every day, every other day at least.
And with the, I love that you said it's an ongoing process, because that goes for way too many levels. For example, if we want to take it specifically to the LGBT community, pronouns. Yes, we are teach from the moment that, not even when we are born, sometimes when we are in the womb, that, oh, it's gonna be a boy, it's gonna be a girl, and we start with the blue and pink colors, etc. And we are taught that there are only two genders. So when a person tells you, hey, I use these genders or that gender, and I identify as such, and then people just respond or react with kind of putting down that person, because no, this is my perception, and my perception is the one who is valid almost. And for the LGBT community, we do have to work a lot with pronouns, and being more proactive on being more inclusive within our community. I think that Reverend Fees raised her hand.
I did. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks for all what you've both shared so far. I have a lot swirling in my head. So I just want to name that I already shared my pronouns, she, her. Also, I think it's really important to recognize and really be so aware of our own identities. And I'm a white, straight woman. And it's really important for me when I come into community to be, and just, always to be aware of that lens through which I'm seeing the world, and recognize that I think in white supremacy culture is present in our nation, in our communities, in our world, and it's at the it's the very root of these power issues and these racial issues. And white supremacy culture is really has, it's not just about racial issues, it's also about trans inclusion and immigration justice. It's very much at that intersection. And I think that, you know, as a white person, that I really want to name that white supremacy culture and white privilege that I have. I have white privilege. People have different levels of privilege, of course. Some people might have male privilege, but not have privilege in other places, right? So there are different ways that works. That's one piece. And then I really want to note, in terms of racial sensitivity, in addition to that, knowing our own identities that we bring into a space, that, and I think you talked to this a little bit, Jonathan, there's a difference between intention and impact. And in my religious community, we've had to do so much work on this, this issue between intention and impact, and people who are well-intended, particularly well-intended white people. And we need to get over it. We need to get out of that. We need to really recognize when we've injured people and hurt people, and privilege, not whiteness and power, but privilege the people who are harmed and who are being harmed by aggressions and microaggressions. So that's something that we've worked really hard on in my local community, and in Unitarian Universalism. We're predominantly white. We have many people of color, and we have some diversity, but we really have to bring that awareness to our work, and really strive really hard to be good allies, and to do this work. I mean, I'll just give you one more example, and then I'll stop. But we, about, I don't know, a year and a half ago, began the work of using pronouns in our community, putting them on name tags and introducing ourselves. Well, you know, we had some issues. We had some real issues around this. People resisted it, people who didn't want to do it, people who questioned it, and then coming to terms with how that impacted the people in our community, particularly people who are trans. And you really begin to see. And we've had similar issues with people of color in my congregation who have had to endure microaggressions. And it's really challenging. And so I share that with you as a start.
Yes, Michelle?
Yes, thank you. You know, I'd just like to add to that, actually all the speakers mentioned really great points. And, you know, the last several weeks especially has been a wake-up call for all of us that really should have happened a long time ago. You know, we're all riddled with unconscious biases, right? That we have, that we don't even know we have. That's why they're unconscious. And, you know, the Reverend Sandra Fees, you just mentioned about being intentional. And I think that many of us in the white community, you know, we have this intention of being an ally, and we think we are. But when you really pause and reflect back and really take a look at what's going on and what's happening, you know, it's definitely that wake-up call that there's a lot more work to do, and we need to be intentional in how we do that. And so from the LGBT Center perspective, you know, I can tell you that, you know, we've thought of ourselves as being inclusive all along, and realize we're not, and we have a lot of work to do to get there, and we're doing that, and we will do that. And I think, you know, this movement right now has spurred change that I think will carry us, and I'm grateful for it, although it's horrific that we've lost lives along the way, and we always have. And I think that even for ourselves, educating ourselves and doing some training and really getting involved in collaborating with the Black community, with people of color in general, that's something that's got to be on our agenda moving forward, and it will be for us. And the use of pronouns, that's a great call out. You know, I will tell you that our program and training director, Bethany Bower, who's on here today, you know, when she goes out into the community and offers training, And that's part of that. The name tags go out and everybody has to put their pronouns in. And we've had issues along the way, or questions along the way. And it all stems back to that unconscious biases that I talked about, that, people think they're accepting and they're inclusive and they're an ally. And really, there's so much more to getting to that. And so I think these are great steps to take, and there's a lot of work to do. So I really do appreciate you holding this day, and Marquise, all the work that you're doing. My friend, you've been a favorite person of mine all along, and I'm just so proud of what you're doing. So thank you for this. And Bethany, if you want to speak to this at all, feel free to engage. Thank you.
I don't have anything else to add. I'm really here to listen and gain some more knowledge. But I do want to acknowledge and just kind of repeat what Michelle said, that the LGBTQ Center of Greater Reading, we acknowledge that we have a lot of work to do, and we have to acknowledge our role in white supremacy and systematic racism, and we have to do better. And that is something that we are committed to. We should have been committed to it more so, and we will continue to be committed to it as we move forward. So I really appreciate these spaces. And again, Marquise, I feel bad calling you out again, but I just want to acknowledge and appreciate the space that you have opened up, and your willingness to partner and be here. So thank you for that. And I'm happy to be here, and I'm happy to be a part of this journey with everybody.
Thank you so much, Bethany, for your words. And since we are here, I also think I should also talk from Reading Pride. And we know the perception that Reading Pride has in the community of Reading. We know that in later years we haven't been as inclusive or even as diverse as we've come to believe that we are. And there have been steps that have been taken to address this. For example, one of the steps was creating a position for the diversity, equity, and inclusion officer who will be in charge of calling the organization out, providing different trainings, and be sure to add more diversity and create a more inclusive environment for everyone. And we didn't only did it just creating a new position, but we also remade the complete bylaws to also include in the mission what we actually want to accomplish. If it's okay, I would like to read a little bit real quick the mission of the organizations of our organization. The mission of this organization is to celebrate diversity in the LGBTQ plus community of Greater Reading. Reading Pride Celebration is committed to diversity, equity, and inclusion by building a community that embraces and supports differences and seeks to eliminate racial oppression, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and other forms of oppression. I also need to state that this happened not too long ago. A year a year ago, this wasn't the stated mission of this organization. So we are looking on this. I think it was in March that we approved these bylaws, and it's not only going to be on paper, but we are also going to take other steps to actually create a work plan on how we're going to achieve the level of inclusion and diversity that this organization needs to be and to achieve. So yes. And also, continuing the conversation, when we were talking about, privilege and whiteness, why don't we talk a little bit about types of privilege in the LGBT community? If it's okay, I would like just to start saying that a lot of the white, gay, and cisgender people only care about equality in as much it benefits them. Their primary desire is to achieve a privilege that is entitled to them as white people, and they are denied because of being gay. So I think starting with that, I don't know who would like to talk a little bit more about that, if you want to elaborate. That's just my thinking about that, because I've seen it. And even when I was in my home country, my first thought when we actually achieved the equalitarian marriage was, okay, cool. The fight is still ongoing because, gay, lesbian, bisexual people may be able to marry, but we still need to fight for our trans brothers, sisters, and siblings. So Marquise, I saw that you raised your hand. Yes.
Yeah. So there's a couple things that get at play here when we talk about intersections and privilege, right? So we have to understand how erasure really tends to happen. So sometimes we tend to default, like I'm speaking like from a blackness perspective, we tend to default blackness to like a masculine energy, right? But when we think about in terms of movements, in terms of history, in terms of public figures, like even the founders of the Black Lives Matter movement, 2/3 of them women are queer women, right? And so we sometimes forget, like, oh, we just see Black women. No, you are actually witnessing Black queer women lead a movement for liberation of all Black people. But there's very particular erasure that tends to happen. So when we look at it overall as a system, sometimes we forget, like, part of the Black liberation means Black queer people, Black LGBTQ plus, are all involved in that movement because they are still Black at the end of the day. So sometimes it's hard for people to really grapple, like, hey, these things can exist at the same time. They're not like mutually exclusive, but oftentimes people are given the decision, like, are you gay first or are you like Black first? And so it's always, are you a woman first or are you Black first, right? So when we're having these conversations in terms of power and privilege, do I always trust the white gays? No, I don't. Because there's still a space where they can retreat back to their whiteness and still be able to cling on to the thing that's closest to power. Because oftentimes when we do that, we cling to the closest things that we have, but we're still denied full access at the same time because we're just like, I'm supposed to have all of this, but there's something about you that's a little different. You're a woman. Oh, you might be queer, right? So when we do have these conversations, we have to look at how erasure really happens in these spaces. But then also like the nuances as well, right? So there's fat phobia in the queer community. There's also femphobia. So when we see different displays outside of the binary, it makes people uncomfortable as well. So it's like really, when you add a lot of nuance into this, there are various intersections that really happen. I'll particularly just talk about like the Black erasure part of it that really goes on. So when we do talk about power and privilege, we have to think about how we already inherit anti-Blackness, but then also the things that we don't find to be acceptable or deemed respectable when you have that intersection of being queer and a woman, or queer and a man, or non-binary, right? So it's those things that really step out that we really have to have a big conversation on. And yeah, Amber, fat phobia definitely is very much so steeped in racism. And so it's really hard to have this conversation about like privilege and stuff without thinking about how racism, capitalism play a role in these various intersections at the same time. So I'll just start with that, but just make sure there's not an erasure happening when we have these conversations in terms of the intersections of Blackness and queerness.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, for example, not only all the intersectionality, but also the discrimination and racism inside the LGBT community,
right?
And how you know, sometimes, in a lot of cases, you know, white trans women are not treated the same as Black trans women. So there's also a lot of discrimination inside the same community,
Right.
The LGBT community, and also that goes to, for example, their accessibility to actual medical assistant, to you know, anything that has to be with their health, because it does affect, you know, the race does affect, because the people are not trained, people are not open to this, people just want to, they already have a certain privilege, so they're gonna, like you said, they're gonna cling on that, and they're gonna stay in their
Right. And that even goes into prison systems too. We don't talk about how trans people in prisons tend to get misgendered, which is why it's important for people to understand how pronouns work, because you can't put a trans woman into a male prison and then think there's going to be some form of equity, nor are you also giving them the right amount of like medicine as well, in order to keep up and be able to manage being a trans person, right? So that's a different set of issues that really happen at this time. So we also have to understand it from a structural standpoint as well, because there are a lot of things that can go into simply misgendering somebody and the violence that happens because of that. So sorry, I just wanted to add that point, but I'm good now.
We have a question in the chat from Scott Case.
Thank you.
To what?
I was just saying thank you.
Oh, thank you, Scott. He wanted to know he's trying to learn more about privilege, and he would like to know the connection between fat phobia and racism. Does anyone wants to tackle that? Okay, we already put put some really
Put it in the thing.
No worries, it's all good. Someone will correct me later.
Just research the mammy figure. That sometimes plays a big role into it. So if you go back to those, the mammy figure was like a big promotion of anti-Blackness and fat phobia as well. So it's like creating a docile character in a lot of these things. So think about why people get so enraged at Lizzo. Try to think about it in that space sometimes. There's a difference in how she owns that space in a way that we don't want fat people to own a very certain level of confidence and or sexuality.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
That's what we're here for, to, you know, and I think this is what we should try to do in our personal spaces, just to create safe spaces when we can come together and have these conversations, because it's important. And also not to, you know, get together with our, for example, our white friends and you know, just becoming close into that space, because we're not gonna have a sharing of new experiences or new knowledge, but also not only talking to people, but also educating ourselves individually. Josh, would you like to tackle the next point?
Sure.
Is it okay if I just say something onto that, Jonathan, though? I do think it's really great to be in spaces, of course, like this, where we can learn from one another. But I do think that there needs to be white spaces held where we talk about our privilege and our power and our role in white supremacy, as to not put that onto, I don't want to say put that onto, but that's all I can think of as far as a word right now, onto our Black, Brown, Indigenous people of color. So we need to still have spaces, again, for white, not for us, but so that we don't put those on to people of color, that we have those spaces to share that privilege, to talk about that privilege.
Yeah, no, of course, and I do agree. And there's a really good group. It's not like a white space, a space where a lot of people who are white will come. For example, it's called Ending Racism, and they're amazing because they basically confront their own privilege without expecting someone else to come and teach them. So they try to learn about, you know, the Black experience and struggles, but then how their own privilege might be a part of that struggle, might be contributing to that struggle. So yeah, Bethany, I completely agree with you on having those types of groups. Yes, Ms. Fees.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on what Bethany shared. I'm on Facebook clergy groups, Unitarian Universalist clergy groups, and we have caucuses for, we have shared space, but we also have caucuses for white women and non-binary colleagues, for Black colleagues, for LGBTQ, all these different groups have caucused, and we had to, I mean, the dominant culture folks mostly had to learn about this, unfortunately, from beginning, I think, with colleagues of color who were continuously being subjected to microaggressions. This is among clergy who are, you know, dedicating time and effort to learning, and we were committing these, you know, making these mistakes just all the time. And they just said, we need our own space away from, you know, the white gaze, away from all of you and who are like injuring us. And you all need to go off and do your own work and don't put that on us. And so I think it's so important. And so I'm really grateful that that came up.
Jonathan, I'd just like to add, you brought up a comment about upending racism, and that's a wonderful group. And we haven't announced anything publicly yet, but we have partnered with them and we are collaborating, and we will be starting an affinity group, an LGBTQ plus affinity group with them. And so we're pretty excited about having that opportunity and having more spaces like this to have conversations, courageous conversations and difficult conversations. So if anybody hasn't checked out Upending Racism, please do. They're on Facebook and they're a really great group with a lot to offer.
That's amazing news, Michelle. Thank you for sharing that. We'll definitely be on the lookout for that. So Josh.
Sure. So kind of turning directions a little bit, especially the time that we're living in now. We hear a lot about how like the first Pride was a riot. We hear about the connections between the current struggle that people are having for their civil rights today, and the history of the Black rights movement and the LGBT rights movement is deeply intertwined. And I just want to talk about how the LGBT freedom and Black rights movements converge in history and now.
Josh, can you just repeat that last piece when you kind of asked a question? I think my computer or something went out a little bit. Can you
sure.
Repeat that?
And then we'll go to Marquise. I saw he raised his hand. I want to talk about how the LGBT freedom and Black rights movement converge in history and now.
Okay.
So a couple things, right? So historically, it's like erased in history the LGBTQ plus folks involvement in the civil rights movement, right? So like I said earlier, Bayard Rustin was Martin Luther King's right-hand man, but he was a Black gay man. So at that time, for optics, he was erased from history because a lot of the Montgomery bus boycott, that was Bayard Rustin. The Civil Rights Act and the whole idea of it was Bayard Rustin and also Coretta Scott King's plan. So a lot of times when we talk about these people, they tend to get erased because we needed a straight Black person and tend to be like straight light-skinned Black person, whatever is most comfortable, to be put in the forefront of a lot of these things, right? So when we do have this conversation, we can't talk about it without understanding, don't mind Philly, without actually understanding like historical context in a lot of this. And then when I even bring it into today's and modern times, it still gets erased that Black Lives Matter is started by 2 out of 3 founders are Black queer women, right? And so we really have to continue to remember that. And sometimes it just, Black Lives Matter, assuming it's supposed to be all Black lives that we're supposed to be fighting for at the end of the day. But when we talk about these movements being intertwined, it is really understanding how history plays a role, how erasure plays a role, but then also how anti-Blackness is also played into a lot of these spaces. And so oftentimes when these movements are created, it has to be done from the intersections of the Black trans woman, because it's always been my philosophy, once you help the Black trans woman, you inherently help everybody else because of these intersections that a lot of people have. But we tend to not worry about that because we're just like, ooh, let's cling on to this sort of power because this world makes sense to us. So when we are talking about Black liberation movements and queer movements, a lot of them are very much so started by Black people, but we tend to erase that. And we're just like, all right, let's put the pretty faces and the ones that are digestible to mass media to the front of this. So sometimes it's like disingenuous to think these movements worked in tandem when they actually were very much so working together the entire time. So I just wanted to be a little bit more clear on that. So it'd be historically dishonest for us to actively erase Black queer folks that were in these movements long before anybody else was. So yeah, and a lot of our thought leaders too, right? Audre Lorde, bisexual woman. You have people like A Raisin in the Sun, Lorraine Hansberry, she's a bisexual woman. Like there's a lot of queer people that are in history. James Baldwin, Black queer man, right? They're all in here. We just tend to erase that queerness because of power and privilege and who wants to dictate what these things are. So it's just like making sure we do our own research on a lot of these Black queer folks that have been at the front of movements, but we just don't want to recognize it as such because of our own internalized homophobia.
Yeah, and that's a great point that throughout history, we just see whatever's most palatable to the white, cis, and straight general public. We see that being presented to the public, and we see that in the history books, but most of the time that's not even close to the case.
Yes, Angel raised his hand. Angel, can you mute yourself?
No, I was just asking Josh if he can repeat what he said because I can barely hear that last part of what he said.
Just now?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. And I said that Marquise brought up a great point that a lot of what's presented to the public and what's in the history books are the figures that are most palatable to the white, cis, and straight population. And even though a lot of times it's not the driving force behind these movements.
And about this specific topic, Marquise brought his knowledge to this topic. I will also invite Reverend Fees and Michelle to bring their own perspectives for this specific point, because as a straight woman from the faith, and as a queer woman that works in an organization that serves the LGBT community, I do believe that they may have different perspective for the same point.
I'll kind of continue a little bit of what Marquise was describing, which I see in my communities, religious community, which is that as someone of as a white person, when I encounter someone who's gay, that's one thing, or if I encounter an African American, that's one thing. But if I am in conversation with someone who's Black, queer, differently abled, all of a sudden there's something about that causes us then to try to kind of hone in on just one identity, or to really become super uncomfortable with that. And there's something about, I think, again, like this like white privilege and white supremacy culture that tries to fit us into a neat little, box, and we're supposed to be one thing, right? Rather than having this fullness of our identities and who we are and what we bring, and celebrating all that, and recognizing that that is what makes for this beautiful constellation of humanity. But I find it, I both experience it, in myself, and puzzle over it, and feel really, I see why it's a struggle for us to really honor. And again, it's the intersectionality among our groups, but within ourselves, that we are not one thing, any of us. And so, yeah. So I think that convergence too, and I'll say, we started with the Black Lives Matter movement and have displayed a banner on our building, and we're going to be displaying or flying a rainbow flag next week, actually. And what I have come to understand in Black Lives Matter is that when I use that phrase, when I say Black Lives Matter, to me, that's really speaking to white supremacy culture, white privilege, and all of the structural racism that needs to be dismantled and addressed. And when that happens, I believe when we are able to begin to really dismantle it, that those other oppressions go with it. That they are not separate in the way we keep wanting to separate them. That trans inclusion, Black Lives Matter, again, immigration, just all of these they're of one cloth. And yeah, so I guess I see them just woven together, and we need them to be woven together in a positive way, right? In an honoring way. So.
Thank you, Reverend. Very well said. Speaking from the organization at this point, it's been interesting along the way. And one of the things that really, really surprised me was that anytime there was a mention on social media platforms or whatever may be in posts about white privilege, crickets, that's all you could hear. And that this has been long since now. I'm talking about 6 months into making some different posts and whatnot that addressed white privilege, because white people don't want to talk about that white privilege. So I think having these types of forums and spaces where we can become better educated, have these difficult conversations is the very first tiny little step to break some of those barriers. And as an organization, I have to be honest with you, and pretty vulnerable right now. We're tearing everything apart. We're tearing everything apart and going to start from the bottom and build up again internally for the structural concept of the organization, from reviewing bylaws that were just done not that long ago, to revamping a mission statement, and literally there's probably 3 pages now, lists of initiatives to do to try to better converge, be more inclusive, and really encourage our entire community to become involved. So I think that the difficult conversations have to happen to get us comfortable to start breaking those barriers and really getting into action steps of what we can do. From voter drives, voter registration drives, to some other systemic issues and initiatives. It all starts with a conversation. And, we're seeking new board members. We are building new committees, seeking new members of committees, leaders for committees. So we're open for that. And we're going to start looking at some different places that we haven't done before. Different events that we've done. We can really talk about maybe where we're going to have them moving forward, and maybe move things into the city more so. You know, right now our center sits outside a little bit. I mean, it's city limits, but it's, you know, it's out kind of out of the heart of the city. So from an organizational standpoint, we're going to try to definitely walk the talk, and we want to converge and have an inclusive organization and inclusive community. So, and that begins with these conversations and some education pieces, and then starting over. And one last thing that I'll add to that, and this is probably being super vulnerable right now on here, but as somebody personally that always considered myself to be an ally, that back in the day dated a person of color, and really was open to anybody and accepting to anybody, I'm learning a lot, and I know I've got a long way to go. But I will sit here and tell you that, and this is in no way, shape, or form in disregard to what's happening to our Black and people of color community today, but it's overwhelming sometimes, the enormity of the work that has to be done. For me personally, I really didn't have any idea of how big and how much there was to be done, from the systemic racism right down to unconscious bias on a personal level. So if I'm feeling that of being overwhelmed, and definitely ready and willing and able to step up and make these changes and really committed to doing so, I think a lot of other white cis people are probably feeling the same, of where do we start? How do we even dismantle all of this? Where do we begin? And so I'm grateful for these kinds of platforms where it gives me the opportunity to learn and engage with others, and it kind of puts it in a better perspective that one step at a time, but we've got to get busy. We've got to get moving. So thank you.
Absolutely. And I saw that Angel had his hand raised. Angel?
No, for real. I just want to say that we have been trying to look like for part of the community, like to be so inclusive. Like what you guys are doing right now, it just is awesome, because we have been around like the local gay community, and we experience everything that you guys are saying right now.
Mm-hmm.
And for the first time, we're like feeling that we are like a whole group that are trying to do the same. And it's just for us that we're listening to each other, we're learning from each other, we're able to like learn and be more acceptance and do what we had to do to get together, because like we have been fighting all this for years, but like it's time for us to like put all the difference, you know, to the side and do this. And it just feels awesome, but at the same time, it's just like I want the people that don't understand our message or like what we're trying to do, to them to like get to us. Because I'm gonna be honest, like I know a lot of you yesterday were saying that you know, it was nice and all that, but I know that there's other people from the community out there that has so much power that we do, and they can do so much more, but they don't want to be part of this. And it's just like, it will be awesome if we get to them and you know, we reach them and we get them to like be part of this movement, because like we need to do something, and you guys are doing that. And it's just like, again, thank you so much.
And by us
like,
by us uplifting our voices and spreading out there, people are gonna feel more comfortable. So
exactly.
That's the
And
best
especially
part.
for the young ones, because I know like a lot of like young people from the community out there are like struggling right now. Not long ago, like 2 days ago.
And me, I've gotten messages from people who like talk to me and say because I'm very confident with my sexuality. I love to express it. I am a gay man, and I'm a gay Black man of color. So I love to express that, and I love to be prideful of that, because I love who I am. So the fact that I get to express myself and people can come to me and ask me questions, it makes me very happy. So
yeah, like I was saying, like
I want people to feel comfortable.
Okay. Yeah, 2 days ago, I heard like this story from a homeless gay young man. He's like 19, and it broke my heart that he was struggling with all that, and he didn't want to tell anyone what was going on. And I knew something was wrong till like he felt like, you know, confident and like prepared to talk about it. And he's moving like out of the city soon, like in the next couple of days. But like I was like, there's a lot of people here that want to help you. There's a lot of people here that are able to do something for you because we know how you feel. And even if you don't have the support from your family or your friends, like, don't call them your friends, because if they don't support you, they're not your friends, you know what I mean? But like, just the fact that there's a lot of people from the community out there that are struggling right now, and you guys are trying to do something about it, that means a lot.
And I don't know, but I feel like we've all been at that point where we felt alone. Because even with a supporting mother and a family all around me that supports me, I still felt alone at some point. But it's the fact that we're doing stuff like this and we can help other people that feel alone, and to tell them, like, you can come talk to us, you can come talk to anyone who's around you. Yeah, because we're all here to support each other.
I know Marquise has his ways. Just wanted to say, Angel, if you're still in contact with that, you can reach. And, you know, I'm gonna be, a little out there, but you can reach out to me, to Amber, or the Readin, but also to the LGBT Center. I'm sorry to call you out, but Bethany too, or even Michelle. We might be able to find any resources or help for that young person. If you know other young persons that might be feeling homelessness, there are stuff that can be done. There are services that are available. Not all of the services are LGBT, but we do know which ones are LGBT friendly, and so we can help. Like, we are here. So please, chat, Family Promise, offer support for homeless youth. Her information, Bethany's information is on the chat. So if you want to reach out or share that information with that person, we're here for the community. So please feel free to do that. And thank you so much for bringing that to this conversation, because we need to address that there's a lot of people that need support. And sometimes, it just go through the cracks and nobody knows what's happening, because either they don't say or someone says but doesn't talk. So we need to be more proactive into actually providing, sharing those services and providing support to everyone in our community. Marquise, you had your hand raised?
Yeah, so a couple things real quick. When we talk about the structural standpoint of a lot of organizations, the first question that needs to be asked is, why aren't people of color or Black queer people feeling invited into these spaces? So that is the first thing of like addressing your organization and your structure and like programming that may be happening, because if that is the case, you have to worry about the anti-Blackness that might be embedded probably subconsciously, and you're not actively saying we don't want Black queer folks here, or that Black queer folks don't feel safe going to these spaces. But it's making sure that there is some form of reflection there. Even me as an educator, like, it is a little bit more comforting when I do see there is a Black person who is there with me. So I see Black students are always like, yo, what you doing here? And there's only like, 4% of Philadelphia right now that are Black educators, but they already move different because there's a safe space just off of simple representation, right? But then it's also making sure that fighting down homophobia in, like, if we're just talking about Reading, Pennsylvania in particular, it's a very conservative area when we really think about it. Like, we're not thinking about like the white conservatives that we all pretty much have like a very specific image of, but we also have to think about archaic ways too, right? So how embedded is the church when into these communities of people of leadership, but won't fully follow the philosophy or fully understand the philosophy of being, or not lifestyle, but like the lived experience of a queer person, right? Because there is a certain thing where they're just like, is this going against what I believe in? Am I ready to unlearn these? But then we also have to understand Reading's culture in itself, like there's a lot of like DL culture, right, in the city of Reading. So there's a lot of people who don't feel like it's safe to go talk about a lot of things because of there's still like a tie to masculinity, and there's still a tie to this community not really ready to fully embrace the spectrum of gender performances, but also sexualities and sexual orientations in our community, because we actually don't have the language. The fact of the matter is, like, I had to come back home from college and explain, like, this is structural racism, this is misogyny, this is homophobia, this is this. So in my mind, when I went to college, everybody was equipped with the exact same language, but I was living in an echo chamber. So coming home and people not really understanding, like, oh, and what do you mean? How are you gay, but also like homophobic? There's internalized homophobia, right? So there's like a lot of these like competing ideologies that people don't have the language to actually fully acknowledge a lot of times. So me and my co-host, we always say like, no, Reading is wild anti-Black and wild conservative. Like, if you wanted to see like a large movement where people are actually living cohesively together, that's not Reading, PA, because a lot of people live in their silos. Black people sit to Black people, Latinx people sit to Latinx people, white people sit to white people. It's still, though we all grew up together, we very much so live in these silos as well. So if we're just gonna keep it real and talk about like the environment of Reading, Pennsylvania in itself, you're not gonna, even, I don't see too many Black queer people in the city of Reading, right? There's like a little bit of an erasure there in some spaces. And so there's like, how do we navigate that? But then also, are we also addressing like anti-Blackness with non-Black people of color in these spaces? But then the people in power, is there a very specific laws or policies that can be pushed as well that's very specific to the LGBTQ plus community? And are we also still making sure that we're not putting money into those that are anti-LGBTQ, right? So when you think about like the Sovereign Center, structurally, they're not it at all because they still deny queer people. But so really, we really think about like the nuances. It's really looking at who are in these positions of power. And I'm always somebody who says culture will change before policy ever does. So if it's like you're going around these spaces and now there is much more representation, but also with that representation is that breadth of knowledge to really equip a lot of people with saying like, oh, well, I can be this and still exist as a full human being. So it's a lot of teaching people to love themselves, but also making sure that they're not dealing with violence in the home too, because we still have to understand there's still like that fear, because most homeless population are young Black queer people in general who are getting kicked out, right? So it's really understanding like these little pockets and how these systems all kind of interlock. And like, is a school creating a space where it's safe? Are Black people creating space where it's safe? Because that's something else the Black community has to address, is the homophobia within the Black community. But then also like white people are kicking their kids out at the same rates. So it's really unlearning this toxic masculinity and this machismo that really is embedded in the city of Reading, because if we're talking about the cultural aspect of it too. So that's really a lot of what that is.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? You know, it's not that I'm the most out there like person, but I have seen a lot of young Black and people of color who also are queer. And
Reading High had a great representation, but it's like, are the resources there actually provided for them to be able to sustain themselves and be them full selves, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, they are there. They are, you know, young Black queer people are here. It's just that, are we providing the services that they need, or maybe they do need it, but are we providing services that are even attractive for them? Because we also need to, you know, to address that. Maybe we're just doing it for older people or older gays or older, you know, transgender people. But are we actually not targeting, but are we promoting services in a manner that a young person, a young non-conforming person will say, okay, that's a place that I can be and I can be part of. So I think that's also another layer to all these specific issues. I don't know if Angel or Jay, do you want to comment? Yeah. Okay.
Yes. In my opinion, I think the Black gay community in Reading, they're like, I don't know if hiding is the you know, the word that I should use, but like I feel like, yeah, Reading is super conservative, and it's just about, you know, especially Latinos and you know, the white community too. And you just like, there was there are people out there, you know, that they're looking for the help, but they're just like, I feel they're afraid, or they don't understand, you know, how to do it. And it just, sometimes it's hard for us to get to them. But like, I feel if we keep doing this, they're gonna come to us, because if we do the right thing, they're gonna feel like safe and all that. And just like, I don't know if you guys saw the video of the trans woman that got beat up by her own community, and that's really, you know, and I understand how they feel, because it's just like, you know, something that we need to understand, and it's gonna be hard. It's gonna be hard. Yeah.
Okay, but not only are they scared to come out and like be in the community, I feel like I don't see a lot of Black gays out here either. So they're not only scared about coming out and being gay, but they're scared because they're also Black. So that's another thing they have to worry about on top of that. Because I go out and I'm scared, like, okay, I'm a Black gay, so I'm just like worrying about a whole bunch of other things, and I'm really thinking about all of that. So I know that's how they feel. That's how, as a Black gay man, that's how I feel when I go out, and that's what we're changing. So I'm sure that's the same thing they feel.
You know, to also take that and bring it to our last or the last focus point that we have. We are over the hour, but also I will also want to ask all of you, what do you think are the most effective ways for LGBT organizations to support and become strategic allies to the Black and POC communities? And to that, I will also add the young Black and POC people, community. Yes.
Yeah, I think we have to be more open-minded about what we do together, because sometimes, like, for example, like what happened yesterday, like, we didn't think what we were doing. We just like, we were like showing love to everyone. It's just like, sometimes we need to think that we don't have limits. Just do what you gotta do, and it's gonna work. Because sometimes I seen that, you know, when there's like stuff going around, like people try to, you know, but what about this? What they're gonna think? In my opinion, right now, thinking about like what someone else is gonna say is not something that is gonna have to be in our minds. It's just like, we need to be so inclusive, and I think we just have to be super open-minded about everything that we're doing, because
And doing things that the younger people would like to do, like starting organizations and stuff, like events and stuff like that, so the younger people can come out and celebrate and enjoy unity with each other. And that way they'll feel more comfortable with the community, you know what I mean? Because right now, yeah, yesterday was amazing. There's so much unity and so much love. There's so much empowerment between everyone. And like, if we keep doing things like that, then I'm sure they'll keep coming out. Slowly but surely, like, it will happen.
And like the same thing that you guys are doing right now of like, you know, sharing like opinions and comments and all that, I think we should do the same with them. Like, have like a forum or like a way that to get them and be like, what's going on? Tell me, because I'm not you. I want to, you know, to know how you feel, and we want to help you, and we want to fix everything that is wrong. Because like they're saying, silence is violence. And if we don't, you know, speak, and if we don't, you know, support, then we're just being part of the, you know, of everything that is happening. And it's like, just the fact that you guys are able to listen, and we're
No. Yes, Reverend Fees.
I'm just thinking about how important it is to show up. And so one of my learnings is that, you know, we don't need to feel like we have to create things always. That sometimes what really matters is that we like you're saying, support what already exists. So if Make the Road is having an event, show up for their event, right? Rather than feeling as though a group has to create their own event and invite other people in. So sometimes we need to lead, and sometimes we need to ally by finding those places. And sometimes we need to create coalitions and collaborate. So I think having some discernment and wisdom around what's needed is really important, and spending that some energy on figuring that out, so that there's an intention, and there is rather than, because I see a lot of this, I'm sure you all do too, where every group sort of wants to do its own thing, which sometimes each group needs that, but more often I think that groups need to come together and figure out how they can have this collaborative approach. And so today, I was invited to be here, I show up, right? And that is really, I think, so important. I mean, and I try to do that when I'm invited. I try to show up. Maybe it's not always possible, but I think that's a really key piece to this. It sounds simple, but it's not simple. We've got so much going on, but doing that and saying, I don't have to show up and be in the spotlight. I can just show up and be part of the movement, right? So.
Absolutely. Jay, I don't know if you want to finish what you were saying, because it got
I'm sorry, his phone got overheated.
Yeah, I apologize for that.
We're in the car and we're like okay, I think he was speaking.
Yeah, I lost my point, to be honest.
I lost my train of thought. I'm so sorry.
But like I was saying, you guys, it's just like finding a way to get them all together, so we can hear their voices, because they're the one that are actually struggling right now. And I hope that someone comes with a great idea of what we can do.
Another thing, I don't really see events that much that include the younger people in Reading.
Yeah.
So trying to start stuff like that, and actually trying to get I don't know, we can think of stuff and try to do them, and get younger people out so they can feel comfortable and slowly get comfortable with speaking up. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think overall there's a perception of what the community wants, but also the community is always thought about adults, and we also need to start thinking about what the younger generation needs and wants too, and how we can make that accessible to them, because not everything has to do with alcohol. Not everything has to do with clubs, for example. We can have different events for different parts of the community, and also not necessarily everything has to be family oriented. Maybe the teens just want to be teens, and it's like, hey, I just want to hang out with my friends that are also queer, and yeah, I don't necessarily want my mom to be hovering over me, because I just want to be me.
I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, absolutely. Go ahead.
I think it's awesome the fact that this group right now, this chat, we are all in different generations, because we're all able to for example, I see Michelle as a great example, and what she does and all that, the support that what she did yesterday, for example, bringing all the facts and all that, and then see people that are actually, they're yes, they're finally we have someone that really care about us, because that was one of the things that happened. It was just I'm gonna be honest, I was scared. I was I don't know how things are gonna go with us, as a gay community doing all this. But then there was a lot of young people there, and that means that we need to get to them, and you guys are doing that. And I feel I'm here to learn from you guys. I'm here to learn
what you guys know. Like I'm the word that I have in my mind right now is just I'm a baby. So Lord, what you guys have to share with us, we are here to listen, and we're here to do what we can.
We are here to strengthen our knowledge, and that way when we unite together, we can really be powerful. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Does anyone else wants to say something? Yes, Marquise.
Yeah, and I guess this is I'll end it off here, is really just understanding it's okay to challenge people in the community to do better. Calling out people to call them in is the best way to do it, to be completely honest. So if you do see anti-Blackness, if you do see homophobia, if you do see a lot of this, it's really understanding how to approach those conversations. And also being able to challenge structures too. Like if something is not serving you, then you make sure that you find some way to ensure that they are serving you to do so. So for example, like when Dear Reading called out Eddie Moran for not making a statement because of, not Ahmaud Arbery, but George Floyd, it was really just one of those things of just like, this is like very low level acknowledgement in terms of making sure that Black people feel seen within this community, because we only make up about 8% of the community, right? And in that 8% is still Black queer folks, right? So who might make up another percentage of that too. So remembering like all these things exist at the same time, but then also is really just being able to give people the audacity to like imagine like a radical world where they can exist as their full selves too. So start building up that culture where you're able to hold a lot of these spaces. It's not just showing up sometimes, it's really just changing stuff from a structural standpoint and making sure you're coming from the most intersectional space that you can come from. So don't make things that are just gonna include like men in terms of law when you don't realize like, hey, make sure a woman, make sure a young person, make sure non-binary people are brought into these spaces. Because if they're not brought at the table where they can actively make decisions and actually talk from their life experience, we're only going to get a bunch of well-intentioned people who actually don't do anything for us. So it's also making sure that those in power are also being held accountable for their ideologies, and they're very much so even more aware of their biases that may perform because they have a certain leverage over everybody else. And this is just like political power, or economic power, or social power. Excuse me. Right. So when having a lot of these conversations, it is really knowing how to hold people accountable, giving young people the ability to challenge you without feeling like it's a personal attack oftentimes, but then also making sure that these spaces are very much so inclusive of everybody. I know like even for like Dear Reading, we're very much so just like, this is a very Black platform, but it's also something that everybody can relate to because it's a humanity at the end of the day. So if it is a space where you can challenge people to do so, I personally do not believe in that phrase agree to disagree, because agreeing to disagree, if it's like based in my humanity and my very existence, I'm not disagreeing. I'm not gonna agree to disagree with you there. Because you're literally denying my right to life, right? So it's also knowing these things and these boundaries that you can place up for people where you know, no, these are my non-negotiables. My racism is a non-negotiable for me. Homophobia is a non-negotiable for me. Misogyny is non-negotiable. So knowing what a lot of these things look like. And I encourage a lot of people, I do this with my students. It's like a t-shirt activity that I do. And so it forces them to think about their identities. So your identity markers like your race, education level, family structure, socioeconomic status, gender, and all of that. I think my thing just overheated, so I'm probably frozen right there. Yeah. But then it's also like a values-based thing as well. So when you have a lot of these in line for people, then they can actually do the internal work, be able to acknowledge their differences. And when you're able to acknowledge the differences with a lot of people, you actually know how to show up better for them. So I always use the simple example, the boys' bathroom does not have tampons, right? Mm-hmm. That's how you show up for women more than you are able to show up for men. There's a thing that people need in order to be able to exist and be able to live their fullest life, because they're given all the tools to have those said things. So just think about it in that terms. What are actual things that people need to make sure that they can have just as much opportunity as the cishet white man?
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Marquise. That's a lot of points that you made that we definitely need to take to heart and take action because we can talk, you know, we can talk so much before we actually take action. And definitely when you say about structures, and you know what exactly people need is definitely something that we all need to take into account. Do we have I don't know if Michelle, Ms. Fees, or Jay and Angel, if you want to say anything else? Okay.
Jonathan.
Yes.
Kimberly Tabbitt just said something important I think you should mention in her message.
Oh yeah. Yes. From the Reading Human Relations Commissions, they said that they enforce the city anti-discrimination ordinance that includes sexual orientation and gender identity expression. We, as I'm reading, we need more reporting so that we can do more enforcement and education. If you can explain a little more, when you said more reporting, do you mean you need more people actually calling organizations out and letting you know? I'm not sure how to interpret that.
So, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, hi. So it was actually to Marquise's point, because he said something to the effect of sovereign. I'm sorry, I'm outside, so it might be a lot of background noise. He said something to the effect of Sovereign Center, they're not it. So Sovereign Center is right downtown. That's somebody I have jurisdiction over. If they're not it, they're not treating our community properly. I need those people that they're not treating properly. You need to report it so that, you know, cases can be brought against these people, against these companies, so that enforcement can begin. I have a commission. I have enforcement powers. I have the ability to make people attend training. I have the ability to fine companies. But not all the time is everybody willing to, they want to come and talk about it, which I understand, but they're not necessarily willing to move forward. And if I don't have a complaining person, then I can't necessarily move forward with something that I want to do unless it's a number of people. That was what I was referring to.
How could people reach out to file reports?
So my office is in City Hall, and our number there is 610-655-6141, city of readingpa.gov. You can get on that way or email me directly. And my name is up there right now, kimberly.talbot@readingpa.gov. And we'll start the process. You know, of course, City Hall is shut down right now, but we are able to do everything via email, the entire process until, you know, of course, we are open again. But we can take inquiries. You know, if you just have questions, I have worked with other members. We actually, Richard is on our board. Richard has been on my board for a couple years now. And he's a member of Reading Pride. So, you know, we try to do what we can when it's brought to our attention.
Thank you so much, Ms. Talbot. The information is in the chat, I believe. Yes, it's in the chat if anyone wants to get that information. Just to finish, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I'm not sure, Enrique, if you wanted to say something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, my name is Enrique. I've just been kind of sitting back and listening, and learning. You know, there's a lot of learning to do, and you know, the only way we can change is if we learn. So, part of, putting this together was, just taking the time to sit back and learn. So I wanted to thank Jonathan, for leading, this conversation so that myself and the other board members can really just sit back and learn from what you all had to say. And I want to thank all of the speakers, everyone, and everyone who took the time to join us today. It was kind of last minute that we, put this together and, asked everybody to speak. I think we started working on this maybe 3 or 4 days ago. And everybody from our community came together really quickly because we all realized how important this conversation was. So I want to thank you all for that, and to Angel and Derek, I will tell you guys, you are, the younger generation, as you said, Angel, a baby. You guys are the future of this community. The organizers that, have been working on LGBTQ rights for so long in Reading, they're all aging, and they're still working hard, but we need the support of our younger community. And I would publicly invite you to reach out to us. We certainly would love to hear what you have to say. We joined you at the beautiful event you guys put together yesterday. And we just, listened to what the speakers had to say in an effort to learn. And you guys did an amazing job with bringing the community together. It was, something that, brought tears to a lot of people's eyes. And to see that it was, 2 young people from the community, doing it more out of love than anything else, that was a really powerful message. So I definitely want to say thank you to the 2 of you. Michelle at the center, you're always someone that and you're always a big help, to everyone in the community. And you were to, Angel and Derek yesterday. So thank you for that, Reverend Fees, Marquise. I learned so much from you today, about the LGBTQ movement and, the Black Lives Matter movement, and how, they intertwine. So really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, all of you. This was so meaningful to have you all come together, and have this conversation. And I really feel like I learned a lot. And using what I learned from you, my hope is, as Vice President of Reading Pride, that we're going to become that diverse and inclusive organization that we strive to be. And the only way we can get there is through having these conversations and with help from people like you. So thank you all.
No, thank you guys for including us, inviting us to be part of this. We're here to work together, and we have to we something so big like this that you guys are doing, and we just want to say thank you to you guys.
Thank you guys so much.
Also, before everyone goes, it's a beautiful day. There's gonna be a cookout on City Park.
Right here, right now.
There. I'm going there after we finish. So amazing. It's just the community coming together. So please be sure to go there.
Sorry.
Yeah.
We had morning, and now it's the. Please come and support Kia in her little cookout.
Kia is one of the members of the community too.
Yeah.
And she's doing something amazing. We're here supporting her, and she's what she's doing today is beautiful too.
It's so beautiful.
You can see so many families here and friends together, and it's just beautiful.
Some ideas that we as different organizations can just do. Just let's go to the park and have a big cookout. Also, the LGBT Center, Michelle, you're gonna have it's not a forum, it's a town hall, if I'm not mistaken.
Actually, it's a town hall workshop happening on Tuesday at 7 o'clock. Along with the Stacey Taylor and the NAACP will be there, and the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League. And it's really a workshop on hate and to address the different forms that hate takes in our community. So I invite you all to be there. You do have to pre-register, and you can find that information on our Facebook page. So thank you, Jonathan, for calling that out for us.
Of course.
And thank you all for being here today.
Yeah. Thank you.
And please remember that upending racism, which one of the person almost, I think is in charge of it, Jennifer, she's here. It's an amazing group. Like I said, you can find them on Facebook. Oh, and Jennifer, do you want to say the next event? Oh, let me.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, good. Okay. I was just putting it in the chat, but June 17th, which is a Wednesday evening, we are having, again, we're going to be celebrating Juneteenth and talking about the significance of that celebration, what it really means related to emancipation, and just understanding what a pivotal time that was in our history and why we need to understand it a little bit more deeply, a lot more deeply. And we will be joined by Stacey Taylor and Sister Elta Jackson Henry from NAACP. And I'm a member too, and I apologize for being late. I was actually registering voters at the park. So join us. We're gonna keep doing it. And we're not stopping. It's everyone. Thank you.
Also, remember to check out the Readin podcast. You can, they're just amazing. I don't know, Marquise, if you have a specific event coming up, or it's just that actually you are in another podcast, right?
Yeah, so I have 2 podcasts. So Dear Reading, you can listen to that. It's primarily on SoundCloud and Apple Podcasts. Spotify is being janky, so don't worry about that one right now. And then also This American Negro, which is a podcast that aims to bridge academia in the hood. So I make academic research a little bit more accessible to our communities, because oftentimes it lives in the echo chamber. So I use that as an educational platform as well. So thank you for that. Dear Reading is turning 2 years old in 1 month from today. So we will have a lot of cool virtual programming happening, a lot of really cool opportunities. And then also Dear Reading is, look out for the announcement, but we are partnering with about 8 to 10 Black and Brown therapists to create a space of healing. So we're gonna bring activism and therapy together, and so we can make a little bit more sense of the world. So y'all get the little exclusive. So be ready for that, and keep your Wednesday nights a little bit clear, so this way we can disconnect from the news and connect together in a space of healing and giving us their actual tools to use during this time.
That's amazing, Marquise. Thank you so much for sharing that. Reverend, I don't know if you have special events coming up.
Oh, good question. We are doing some of our, I guess what I'd say is more internal work, and seeking opportunities like this to show up at events and be engaged. So appreciate what all of you are doing, and appreciate this time today. And thank you. And I hope that more faith communities. There are other faith communities besides mine who are supportive of this justice work and anti-racism work. But it is, as people have said, it is difficult in this conservative area to find that that religious leaders will come out for this intersectional kind of approach. So we've got work to do.
With that, I also want to invite everyone to be part of the virtual Readin Pride. It's going to be on June 19th. If you know any artists or performers that would like to be part, please reach out to us. We still want to, for more performers, and want to have everyone across the board. we're looking for anyone that basically wants to share their art. So please, 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 either tell us who you would like to see that we're also looking for local talent to showcase them. So please reach out. And also, thank you so much for being here. We need to keep the ball rolling. We can have conversations, but we also need to take actions. So let's be sure to take actions and have a conversation too while we're doing it. Let's keep learning. Let's keep working hard because this is necessary for our community for us to show support and to show that we actually are here and that we are even allies. So thank you so much everyone for being here. Enjoy the rest of your day. Hopefully we'll see each other soon on the cookout. So thank you so much for being here. Bye.
Bye. Thanks for having us. See ya.
Of course. Thank you.
Bye. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that went really well.
Wait, stop recording.